And I'd like to thank everyone for coming here today to our webinar, an opportunity to invest in Fogo de Chão Canada, which is being organized in partnership between the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce and the Beer Hospitality Group, exclusive development partner of Fogo de Chão Canada. My name is Calil Leopoldo, Business Development Coordinator at the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to thank our annual sponsors, Vale, Proactiva Results, Farby Mining, Brookfield, Lundin Mining, BMA Law, and Mellowhawk Logistics for their support. We are here today to present Fogo de Chão Canada and to discuss the investments opportunities related to it. Before we start, I want to introduce the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and we are an independent, not-for-profit association that has been establishing connections between Brazil and Canada for over 50 years now, strengthening bilateral trade and investments relations and facilitating the exchange of experience in both private and public sectors. For more information about the BCCC and upcoming events, please follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter via the website that we just added to the chat. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Michael Wilkings, founder and CEO, and Jim Bowen, CDO at Debut Hospitality Group, who will present this webinar. Thank you so much, Jim and Michael, for coming here today to talk about Fogo de Chão. And the stage is yours. Thank you so much. I will prepare the video for us to start. Beautiful.
Nearly 45 years ago, Fogo was created on a strong foundation of authentic Brazilian hospitality and delivering unique experiences to our guests. Today, we've evolved from a small restaurant in the countryside of southern Brazil to a category leader celebrating the centuries-old culinary art form of churrasco. 2022 was a transformative year for us, a culmination of the past 7 years in which we created new ways for our guests to experience Fogo with new discoveries at every turn. Thanks to you, our Fogo family, and our guests, we just finished another record year of growth in 2022. We opened a record-setting number of new restaurants, both here at home and also internationally with our franchise partners. Our new restaurants showcase new features designed to enhance the guest experience with next-level brand experience and service elements. Each new store you help us open provided career advancement opportunities for those on our team, as well as economic growth in our new communities through local contracts, employment, and sourcing. We've always invested in our people, our guest experiences, and our communities to bring the soul of Southern Brazilian hospitality to the heart of every city and to feed a purposeful future for all. We care deeply for you and the communities we serve. We always have and always will. There's a great deal to be proud of and thankful for as we close out 2022 and we look ahead to 2023. At Fogo, we continually strive to give our guests an unforgettable experience of joy and discovery, and to continue to live in the best moment of dining. In 2023, we'll continue our growth strategy and reinvest to feed a purposeful future for you, our Fogo family, our guests, and our communities. Deixe comigo, we got you.
I always get hungry when I see that video.
So thank you everybody for joining this webinar, and thank you very much to the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce for hosting it. We're very grateful and very proud of our association with the BCCC and their support, and thank you again. So Debut Hospitality is an international hotel and restaurant developer and operator that's been in business for 40 years. And we had the unique opportunity last year to become the exclusive franchisee for Fogo de Chão in Canada. And we have a program to develop the brand across Canada over the next few years. And one of the main, apart from the excellence of the brand and the excellence of the experience when you dine at Fogo de Chão, one of the things that compelled us the most was the financial performance of the company. This company is extraordinarily successful financially. It's extraordinarily successful on every level, but financially, from the point of view of potential investors and our existing investor partners, the financial success of the company is what really attracts investors. And that success is not a flash in the pan. This is a company that has been in existence for 45 years. It has weathered recessions and wars and all kinds of climate problems and tornadoes. And yet Fogo de Chão continues to generate outstanding revenues and outstanding profits for its stakeholders. And that applies in multiple markets. It's one of the most really remarkable success stories in the restaurant industry that Fogo de Chão can be as successful as it is, whether it is in Brazil, whether it's in Mexico, whether it's in Dubai, or whether it's in the United States, from coast to coast, from Los Angeles to Miami. Consistently, year in, year out, no matter what's going on in the world, Fogo de Chão is successful and profitable and grows. So last year, 2022, Fogo de Chão achieved an average revenue per restaurant of $10.2 million US. And to put that into perspective, that's the second highest full service restaurant revenue in the United States, behind only one competitor. And there are literally thousands of full-service restaurant competitors in the United States. Fogo de Chão was number 2 in terms of revenue per location. And this year, 2023, they're on target to be number 1. The profitability is also remarkable. Last year, 2022, the average restaurant margin of a Fogo de Chão restaurant in the United States was 27.7%. Now, in any business, in any sector, to get a margin of 27.7% is remarkable, but to do it in the restaurant industry is doubly remarkable. And that's an average. And Fogo has restaurants in Las Vegas and in Albuquerque. So Las Vegas did much better. Albuquerque did slightly less. But on average, across the entire chain of 56 restaurants in the United States, 27.7% restaurant margin. And equally remarkable, the cash-on-cash return on investment on new restaurants was 40% last year, which means that if the company invests $5 million in a new restaurant, it means that the cash generated from the operation is $2 million, which means a complete payback of investment within 2.5 years. So this brand, Fogo de Chão, is a profit machine. And we'll tell you a little later in this presentation why that is the case. Next slide, please.
So it sounds a bit too good to be true. And as we dug into the numbers, we began to understand why they achieve these returns. Fogo was able to get more revenue per seat than a typical restaurant. And that's because from the minute you sit down, you're starting to eat. You know, you're welcome to go to the market table. The gauchos are coming to your table to serve you the meat. And it's exciting, and you start eating right away, which means you finish sooner, which means you leave sooner, which means the table can be turned to another customer. You know, during the week, Fogo typically does 1.5 to 2 table turns across the day. On the weekends, it's 2.5 to 3.5. So that's part of what you're seeing in those EBITDA numbers. More revenue per square meter of space. Also, lower food costs. One of the surprises to me when we started to really understand the format is that people eat less at Fogo than they do at a typical steakhouse. You know, when you order a steak at a full service steakhouse, it comes on a plate, and you may not eat the whole thing, but the restaurant has to throw out what you don't eat. At Fogo, you're being served by the slice. So there's very little wastage. What you don't eat was never on your plate. so it can be served to another guest. Also in the butchering process, there's a lot less wastage. They've been able to engineer the offcuts of meat into other products. For instance, in the States, they serve an $8 hamburger that is entirely offcuts from the larger cuts of beef. So basically, zero food cost goes into that burger. Pass it on to the guests at 8%. Feels like a really good deal. Partly because of this, the kitchens are smaller. Basically, everyone in the restaurant is eating the same thing. It's not a typical restaurant format where you sit down, you're handed a menu, you make a decision, the waiter comes over, takes your order, takes it into the kitchen, they put the ingredients together. You know, that whole process has been eliminated because everybody is more or less eating the same thing. Now, not everybody, because they do allow for vegetarian diets, pescatarian, vegan. There are a la carte items, but by and large, most people are eating the churrasco menu. Lower staff costs, and this is because there's an entire segment of wait staff that have been more or less eliminated. The gauchos are serving the food right out of the kitchen. Of course, you do get attended to with wine and cocktail orders, and your water glasses filled, but that's 1 or 2 people, in the restaurant. It's not 10 people taking orders and delivering the food. And then the last one was really surprising: less staff turnover. We continually meet Fogo employees who have been with the company for 10, 20 years. There's incredible loyalty and incredible promotion from within the company and growth. So that's something that we are definitely going to continue here in Canada. We will source our manager and our gauchos from the pool in the US right now. And there's also extensive training offered by the franchisor, so that people really are qualified and comfortable in their jobs. So we'll be taking full advantage of that as well. So that's this. These are the reasons behind the numbers that Michael was just sharing with you. Next slide. So we are a limited partnership company. We have the exclusive development rights for Fogo de Chão in Canada. That's a 10-year contract that continues past the 10 years, so long as we build 1 restaurant a year, basically over the 10 years. That is our commitment. Next slide. Since I'm talking, start with mine, and then you can take over. I am Vice President of Development. My background is in commercial development, primarily in Asia. I was also, I ran a retail planning consultancy based in Singapore for many years. And I'm resident here in Toronto, and I'm a Canadian citizen.
And I have been in the international hospitality industry for over 40 years. And we've been involved in high-end projects, not all over the world, but in many parts of the world. Restaurants, resorts, hotels, development and operations, working with major international brands. So we're very comfortable and very accustomed to working with brands like Fogo de Chão and respect and adhere to their policies and their procedures and their brand standards, which made them successful. And recently, we've been involved in resort development in Mexico and the Caribbean. We've had extensive food and beverage experience almost on every continent for 3 or 4 decades. I hesitate to say that, but that's how long it is. And I also am a Canadian citizen and also reside in Toronto, notwithstanding my accent. So we're organized in Canada as a limited partnership structure. And there are many advantages to limited partnerships in Canada, which anybody that's interested, we can discuss with in more detail, tax advantages and other advantages. In this particular case, limited partners invest in a particular restaurant. So you'll see shortly that our first 2 locations will be in Toronto and Vancouver, and investors can choose to invest in Toronto or Vancouver or both. The minimum investment is 100,000 Canadian dollars. The projections that we have that are based on precedents from Fogo de Chão operations in the United States indicate at least a 35% IRR. And we have now extended our deadline for investment in our first raise, and we're in the middle of our first raise of progressive raises. We've extended the deadline to April the 15th. And after April the 15th, we will be into our second round of investment, which will be less favorably priced. So anybody that wishes to invest, if they do so before the middle of April, they'll have the most favorable terms and conditions and pricing on the investment. And limited partners receive a 10% interest on their investment funds, plus they get 100% priority return of capital, which means that the general partner takes no distributions at all until investors have been fully repaid, 100% repaid all of their investment capital, plus the 10% interest on their investment, 10% per annum, by the way. After the capital has been returned and the 10% interest has been fully paid, then investors participate in 50% of the distributable cash flow for the life of the project, for the life of the restaurant. And given that there are many Fogo restaurants that have been in existence for more than 20 years, that perpetuity could be a long time. Could be 20 years, could even be more. And throughout that entire period, investors are receiving their proportionate share of 50% of the distributions. If the business is sold, or if any particular restaurant is sold, then investors receive 50% of the sale proceeds. And there are some nice fringe benefits. So for every $100,000 investment, investors receive a certificate for complimentary dining of $2,500, which pays for a lot of dinners, and a 20% discount on food and beverage consumption and retail purchases, again, for the life of the restaurant. And there were some other benefits that were, we didn't put on the slide, but you get priority reservations, priority notice of special events, and other little perks that make it fun to invest. Next slide, please.
So our first location is in a building called the Post in Vancouver. This is a landmark project. It's one of the largest developments happening in all of Canada. It's an old Canada Post sorting station, and it takes up an entire city block. It faces West Georgia, and it runs between Homer and Hamilton. Our space is just at the top of the stairs that you see here. That area with the umbrellas we're actually going to cover, so we get four-season use of the exterior patio space as well as the interior space. Can I get the next slide? And one of the things that sold us on this space is that it is going to be Amazon's Canadian head office. There'll be 7,000 employees in those two towers by the end of 2024. And that's a lot of meat eaters. Here's the preliminary floor plan. We've just been through this planning exercise, and we're, how many seats, Michael? 225?
246.
246. You see the bar on the left. The grill is sort of the upper left-hand side with the market table wrapped around it. All indoor seating, and then on the right-hand side, the outdoor seating at the top of the steps. Next slide. And our second location is at 55 Mercer Street in Toronto, which is the corner of Mercer and Blue Jays Way. And this really is the heart of the entertainment district. We have the Rogers Stadium at one end of the street, TIFF and the Mirvish theaters at the top of the street, the Bisha Hotel directly across from us, and then under construction along with our tower is the new Nobu Hotel and Restaurant, which will probably be Toronto's best hotel when it opens. Both Toronto and Vancouver are planned to open first quarter next year. So we've got our work cut out for us. Here's a floor plan. Bar area, you see the grill area right in the center of the space, again with the market table wrapped around it. Slightly smaller than Vancouver, and we don't get outdoor seating, but we are going to get a heavy drinking population here, right in the entertainment district. So really good revenue projections coming out of this. Next slide. Mike.
Okay, so these are projections that are based on Fogo de Chão's performance in the United States. And although you can't directly translate the USA to Canada, there are so many demographic similarities that we believe it's reasonable to assume that performance in Canada in Canadian dollars will be somewhat similar to Fogo's performance in US dollars in the United States. So in Vancouver, at the Post, you'll see that we're forecasting just over $9 million of gross revenue in year one, which rises slowly over 5 years to almost $12 million. And in terms of EBITDA, we are projecting an average of just over 21% EBITDA, starting at almost $1.3 million and rising over 5 years to $2.5 million of EBITDA. The EBITDA percentage is a little lower than in the United States because we pay a royalty, and in the United States, all of the restaurants are corporately owned and operated, so they don't pay themselves a royalty. But still, 21% we feel is anything around 20% EBITDA is a very healthy return on investment. In Toronto, as Jim said, it's a smaller restaurant, but we expect to have a higher number of table turns on an average night than in Vancouver because of the density of population and the residential density around our site in Toronto and the tourist density around that site will lend itself to all-day operations. Rather than having a peak at lunch and a peak in the evening, in that location, we can see steady traffic throughout the day. So in this case, we're looking at year one revenue of nearly $9 million, rising slowly over 5 years to just over 10 million, and EBITDA starting at $1.1 million and rising to $1.8 million, nearly 1.9 in year 5, representing an average of 18%. In both cases, the IRR, which is the internal rate of return on equity on investors' funds, is in excess of 35%. And these are financial projections that we can go into more detail with any investor that's interested in more detail. We have a lot more detail behind these numbers, so we can discuss. But on the basis of these projections, the IRR is north of 35%, which I think everybody will agree is a very good investment basis. Next slide, please.
So we are looking at Montreal locations at the moment. We have not signed a lease yet in Montreal, but we're looking at 2. We could do both. We could do one of the 2. The one on the left is the new Maestra project that is on St. Catherine Street, near the corner of Saint Laurent, well, just across the street from Place des Arts. This is the Quartier des Spectacles, the equivalent of Toronto's entertainment district. And the image on the right is a really interesting project that's at the corner of 2 major arteries in the city, the Décarie Expressway and Metropolitan Boulevard, which is the Trans-Canada. And the tenanting here is very similar to Yorkdale Mall here in Toronto. A lot of high-end brands, a lot of major food chains. So still negotiating, but both of them are looking at an opening of early 2025. And then in addition, we're looking now for our second site in Toronto. We're not sure yet about a second site in Vancouver. We might go to Calgary next. So all of these are kind of subject to what's available in the market. But I think our third location will be definitely Montreal. And the last slide is the web address where you can find a lot more information. We're happy to have a call with anybody and take them through anything they'd like specifically, but there's a lot here at debutrends.ca/Fogo de Chão. And that is the presentation. So we're
happy to invite questions if anybody has any questions.
We have one from Gustavo. What's the average ROIC and payback in the USA? Let me just type this in the chat so you can all see.
Yeah. Yes. So the average return on invested capital and payback in the USA is 40% per year. So as I said earlier, if the investment was $5 million, the payback will be 2.5 years and a 40% return on invested capital. That's a cash on cash return. If we translate it to an IRR, then I don't know the average IRR number in the States, but it's 40% or higher.
If anyone is interested, Fogo is going through a public offering at the moment, and they've filed an S1, which has all of their financial information disclosed to the public. It's available online. We'd be happy to send you the address. If you just search Fogo de Chão S-1, the link comes up. There's a lot of good information on the US there.
Yes, that's a very, very good point, because the company, their profit performance in the last few years more than supports an IPO in the States. They're going public on the New York Stock Exchange. And as Jim says, all of their financial information is now in the public domain. So the numbers that we talked about earlier in this presentation, in this webinar, are all in the public domain. They're all public information, and anybody can, and in fact, if anybody's really interested, they have a filing called an S1 with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which has a lot of very, very interesting information in it. So we can help you navigate to that site if you're interested. To this question, total capital for each restaurant, it very much depends on the situation. In the case, another question is Vancouver. So the budget for Vancouver is $5.5 million on an all-inclusive basis, which means all of the construction, all of the fit out, all the furnishings, the kitchen, the air conditioning, the extraction, everything down to the grease trap, all of the soft costs involved with that, designers, architects, engineers, security, deposit for the landlord, Fogo's franchise fees, etc., pre-opening costs, etc., etc. So on a total turnkey basis to the day of opening in Vancouver, 5.5 million. In other cases where if we have the possibility to renovate an existing restaurant, if we're able to acquire and then renovate an existing facility, the investment could be lower because we would inherit some improvements like, washrooms and the bar and plumbing and so on that we can reuse. So in that case, the capital investment would be lower. So it's very much dependent on the site conditions, what each individual investment would be. And right, percentage of cash distribution. So there's a waterfall, what's called a waterfall, which is the priority of payments to investors. So the first priority is that 100% of distributable cash flow goes to pay the 10% interest coupon. After that, 100% of distributable cash flow goes to return of capital, so that investors will get their investment returned, get it back, as quickly as possible. After that, then distributable cash flow is split 50-50 between the investors and the general partner. The general partner does not take any distributions at all until investors are fully repaid together with their 10% interest coupon. And then the next question in terms of what's the average ticket? So in the United States, the average spend per head, the average ticket is $68 US, 68 US dollars. And just as an aside, just to put that into perspective, one of the most successful restaurants is Cheesecake Factory. The average check at Cheesecake Factory in the United States is $26. And their revenue is more or less the same as Fogo de Chão. So it means that an operation like Cheesecake Factory has to work 2.5 times as hard to generate the revenue as Fogo de Chão does. In Canada, until we're operational, until we are in operation, we can't know what the average check will be. But we think it'll be about $90. Somewhere around $90 will be an average spend per head. And to the next question, capital for the Mercer Street restaurant is right around $5 million. Again, on a turnkey basis, covering everything right up to the day of opening. So Vancouver's about $5.5 million, Toronto's about $5 million.
Mike, I'm just going to pick up on your comment about the average check. It's very interesting the way Fogo plans their pricing. Every single restaurant has different pricing, even within the same city. It's not uniform pricing across the chain. And the reason they do that is they do a survey within their market area of what the top steakhouses are charging. And they take a basket of a ribeye steak, a shareable side, and a dessert. And they average the price of that at all of the competition. And then they target Fogo's price at 80 to 85% of that. So they're trying to come in about 20% less than the steakhouse competition. We've done that for our locations, and we think that it's going to bring us in around parity to the keg. The keg is around $85, $85 to $90 for an average check. So that's kind of what we're looking at now as we look at different markets.
So the question from Helbert about smog. So Fogo de Chão does not use charcoal grills. In some of their early restaurants, they did, and certainly in Brazil, I think they probably still do. But in the United States, where the emission regulations are so much tougher, they actually don't use charcoal grills. They use gas grills. But the grills are designed to give the appearance as if it was charcoal. So it looks authentic, but it's not actually charcoal. And there's some advantage to that, which is temperature consistency. So in a charcoal grill, in a commercial charcoal grill, the temperature of the heat is not consistent because the charcoal is burning, hotter here, colder there, and so on. With a gas flame, you can control the temperature precisely so that the gauchos can precisely measure whether the meat is rare, medium, medium well, etc., etc. So there's no smog issue at all in any city. And there was another question. I can't see it. It popped up when I was talking.
Well, there are some questions from BCCC. There are some of the toughest here. They're asking what happens if there are cost overruns during the fit out. Investors will not be asked for additional investment. Debut is guaranteeing the cost of the fit out. We're basically taking it on as a design build contract, a fixed price contract. So if there are any cost overruns, we are the ones that make up the difference, not the investors. Will we be charging any fees during the restaurant opening? No, we're not. We will charge a management fee once the restaurant opens, but we're not charging any kind of development fees prior to the restaurant opening. We will pass through some overhead charges that are split between the two restaurants that are nominal, but there are no development fees. And then the third question is, will investors have any priority rights in future locations? Yes, they will. Even though we will be changing the investment structure 15th of April, any investor at this stage holds that same investment structure throughout the life of the brand. So if you want to 5 years from now come in on a deal in Saskatoon, it would be on the same basis as you'd be investing now in Toronto or Vancouver.
Do you think we'll actually go to Saskatoon?
As I said that, my heart skipped a beat. Apologies to anyone out there from Saskatoon.
Yes, apologies to Saskatoon. So the NATO's question, our average check, our financial projections, we think are realistic to conservative. And an average check of $90, we agree, is actually not very high. I mean, I know when I go out to dinner with my wife, we never get away with a $90 average check. So our average check may well be higher than that. But to your point about families and kids, it's very, very much part of the Fogo ethos and culture to take care of families. And a lot of Fogo's business in the United States is for families. And I forget the percentage, but they have published the percentage of revenue that is for families, and it's quite high. And it's a great experience for families. Parents go there with their kids. It's a very interactive, very kinetic kind of dining experience, and kids love it, absolutely love it. And it's also Fogo policy to provide free meals for children under the age of
6.
I think it's 12. Is it 6?
Yeah.
I forget. So young kids eat for free. So it's very, very family friendly. And then moving on, a Mercer Street restaurant, the answer was $5 million for Mercer Street. And to Mauricio's question, well, so there's no deadline on investment except to say that on April the 15th, we're closing the existing investment round on April the 15th. So the terms and conditions and the benefits that we've just talked about not all of them will apply after April the 15th. So the price per limited partnership unit today is $1,000. After April the 15th, it will be more expensive. We haven't decided exactly what the delta will be, but it will be more expensive. And at the moment, for example, we're offering a 20% discount on consumption for the life of the restaurant. We may reduce that. So the perks may get a little less and the pricing may get a little more after April the 15th. But the investment is still available after that time. It just won't be on quite as favorable terms.
So I think that's all the questions.
No, Bernato's got a new question. Do you see it? The question is, Jim, your experience in Asia, what do you think about? Can you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, my in-laws are from the Philippines, and they will travel miles for an all-you-can-eat restaurant. It's huge in Asia. So we were very strategic in locating both of our restaurants, Toronto and Vancouver, close to the real density of Asian population in those cities.
And then to the question about where will Fogo be sourcing for suppliers, the answer is absolutely in Canada. The only situation in which we will source suppliers outside of Canada will be if a particular product was not available in Canada or was not available at the quality required by Fogo. But other than that, we will be sourcing from Canadian suppliers, absolutely. And our contract with Fogo de Chão specifically allows us to do that. We're not locked into US or any other suppliers, and we're not locked into Fogo's traditional suppliers in the USA. So this is very much a Canadian enterprise, and we'll be sourcing from Canadian suppliers and as far as possible in each of our local communities.
When we first met with Fogo, they said, our Mexican franchisee insists on promoting US beef in Mexico. What's your situation in Canada? And we said, absolutely not. We will be promoting Canadian beef in Canada. And when I was in Calgary looking at sites, they made it clear that they don't even want to hear Canadian beef. They want to hear Alberta beef. So we'll have to figure out how we navigate that one. But yeah, definitely Canadian beef.
So the question about happy hour discounts, yes. Not only will we have happy hour discounts, but Fogo and we in Canada will have all-day happy hour on South American wines. So, and Fogo has regular happy hour promotions. So happy hour, the concept of happy hour, which means, discounts for guests. Yes, we will be carrying that through in Canada. Absolutely. And I should also mention, we will have Canadian wines, on the wine menu. There are, obviously, as we all know, there are some very, very good wines from different parts of Canada now. So we will definitely include Canadian wines in our wine menu.
Yeah, so like BC wines in BC, Ontario wines in Ontario.
Absolutely. And then corporate events, well, that's another good question, Renato. Corporate events are a big part of the revenue makeup in the United States. And some of the larger restaurants have corporate event rooms where companies can hold, training sessions or, whatever kind of corporate event they need to. And that operates all day, starting at breakfast. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, meeting rooms available for corporations. So yes, the corporate event business is very important to us, particularly in Vancouver, where we've got 7,000 Amazon employees sitting on top of us. I think we'll do a lot of corporate business, but for sure we'll be doing corporate promotions and catering. The other thing is Fogo do a lot of catering off premises, and that's corporate catering. So if a company wants to host a Fogo de Chão lunch for VIPs or whatever, we will cater that in their office or in another location of their choice.
I didn't point it out when I showed the Vancouver floor plan, but there is a private dining room built into that floor plan. We're able to divide off a section of the tables with sort of like ballroom door panels like you'd see in a hotel. Toronto, unfortunately, was too small to allow us to do that, which is why you see that their revenues are slightly smaller, slightly lower in Toronto. But we would be able to rent out the entire restaurant during the day, for corporate use.
The question about 100K investment, yes, 100,000K investment on a $5 million restaurant the investor would receive 2% of the 50% of the distributions after the capital has been paid. That assumes that all of the investment comes, from the limited partner investors. We're not going to put any debt on these operations, like bank debt. We're not going to put bank debt on these operations, certainly in the early days. Maybe in the future we'll consider it. But we will consider leasing some equipment. So we may lease kitchen equipment and, maybe some other equipment, which could mean that the 2% could become slightly more. But basically, yes, if the investment is $5 million, 100% represents the $100,000 represents 2%. How many seats average per store? Depends entirely on the size of the restaurant. But the ideal size is 7,000 square feet, and the optimum seat count is 200.
Yeah, in Toronto, we just couldn't get that in the entertainment district. We looked at a lot of sites, and there's very few restaurant sites available at 7,000 square feet. So we had to go in at a little over 5,000 feet, 5,500, and work with that. And we just thought, well, we'll do 2 restaurants in the area. And so there's no radius clause. The radius clause is where the landlord says you can't build another restaurant within X number of kilometers. We don't have that in Toronto. We could actually go in and do another one right in the middle of the financial district or the Eaton Center, or so another high density location very close.
Mauricio's comment, thank you very much for saying nice things about Fogo. And we'd be happy to go to the Fraser Valley. So we can talk about that in the future.
Or Whistler.
Or Whistler. Derek's question about food and labor costs being high in Canada. So yes and no. Labor costs, like minimum wage now, in Ontario, for example, is $15.50. I think in BC it's 15.65 from memory. That's very similar to California. So, of course, there are a number of states in the USA that have much lower minimum wage, but lots of states have minimum wage comparable to Canada. California is one. And yet Fogo is still very, very successful in those markets. And as Jim said earlier, Fogo prices to the market. There's no set price. Like the Churrasco all-you-can-eat menu is not the same price at every restaurant. It's a different price in different markets. And that pricing reflects the labor cost in those markets. So the fixed price churrasco meal in Los Angeles is more expensive than it is in, Georgia. And we will do the same. We'll accommodate the market. And in terms of food cost, that's reflected in the selling price. I mean, it like cost of goods sold is a function of the menu price and the cost of the item. So we think that our food cost, we're budgeting an average food cost of 32% across the board as an average in Canada. That's very, very comparable with the major, the major steak restaurants. In Vancouver, I'm sure there's a restaurant called Black and Blue that's very, very successful steak restaurant. That's about where their average across the board cost of food is. So we're budgeting around there, but our average check is higher than in the States. Our average check may be around $90 compared to $68 in the States. So cost of goods sold, cost of food and beverage is a function of supply cost and selling price. So, swings and roundabouts, we're fairly comfortable that we're going to end up with a cost of goods sold it'll be higher than in the United States, but it'll be at a level that will still provide the return, the profitability, I should say, that we're forecasting. And we've done a lot of research on this. We've done a lot of analysis on, our VP of operations has analyzed labor costs across pretty well every province in Canada. We've got a very good handle on it, and ditto with the sources of supply. So we're fairly confident that our cost of goods sold numbers are pretty accurate. Okay. Right. So picanha is a major menu item for Fogo. They sell a lot of picanha. It's interesting little statistics, by the way. Fogo is the largest importer of Wagyu beef in the United States and the largest importer of New Zealand lamb in the United States. The quality is very, very high. And yes, Canadian beef is way better than it was before. And we will be serving lots of picanha. To Nagar's question, yes. I mean, if two investors want to team up and to create a minimum of $100,000, that's fine. As long as the subscription is for $100,000, the investors can create a mini club within that 100,000 if they wish to. And to Fabio's question, yes, we do have a program where suppliers and contractors can invest in kind through the provision of products and services. And that, if that's something of interest, we'll be happy to discuss that separately. We can get on a call with you to talk that through. But we do have a program for investment in kind, if that's of interest to you. And to Gustavo, no problem. My immediate suggestion is, if your funds are available in June, if you sign a subscription agreement, now or in the near future, so make a commitment. Like the subscription agreement is a commitment to invest. And if you entered into the subscription agreement now, but actually provided the funds, in a couple of months, I think that's fine. The important thing is to subscribe before April the 15th to get these terms and conditions. But we can be flexible on the timing of the cash receipt within reason. 2 years won't work, but June would work.
Okay. If anybody does have questions that come up after this, just feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to jump on a Zoom or Teams call anytime.
And we'll follow up with all registered attendees of this webinar to give you our contact details. And as Jim said, we're available anytime by email or on a call. And if anybody's in Toronto, we'll be happy to meet personally. Just reach out. We'll be here. Well, no more questions.
Yeah.
Khalil, thank you very much. Thank you very much on behalf
Thank
of
you so much, Michael.
BCC.
Thank you so much, Jim. It was really great webinar with amazing information. We're really excited about Fogo de Chão in Canada, and we're really happy to be part of this growth. You can always count on us, and we're gonna be available for questions. If any attendees has some questions, you can send to us, we can direct to them. And we are available and trying to help. Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you very much.
Michael.
And thank you everybody for attending.
Night, everyone.
Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
bye for now. Bye-bye.